think we're going to go ahead and get started with the nutrition part. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brittany DeFell, and I have a 2-year-old son named Eli. He has spastic quad cerebral palsy, and I was asked here to speak in honor of him and tell a little bit about our journey on nutrition and blended diets. So most would agree having a medically fragile child comes with many challenges. One of the biggest challenges on this journey has been with nutrition. He started out being extremely underweight, so adding more calories, fortifying meals, so on and so on. And then now our biggest battle has been with him being overweight, eating less and being watched carefully by a dietitian. Eli had a very hard road to start, and in the NICU he faced having no gag reflex, showed poor sucking, and little to no swallow. This led us to having a feeding tube placed. Eli suffers from reflux and has had a G-tube and a Nissen surgery. With feeding tubes come questions of how much food, what type of food, and if any supplements or vitamins, extra vitamins would be needed. Fortunately, I was able to exclusively pump for the first 18 months of his life. But as my milk supplies dwindled, I found myself asking, what next? Since we already had a dietitian and continuously were battling weight issues, I sought out to do extra research from different mommy groups, cerebralpalsy.org, and I also found the Blenderized RN on Facebook. Ultimately, my research and the GI clinic I found helped me answer all my questions. So then came the big question, how do I do and what do I do when it came to the feeding him real food? I didn't know exactly how many calories I would need, how many grams of fat, protein, sugar, how would I store it, oh, and the extra stress, not to mention. However, I do know how to cook, and I know how to use a blender, and surely I can be taught. So with my wonderful dietitian, she came to the rescue. We started transitioning with our current regimen of milk or either formula, whatever you may use. We added carrots, and we would do that 3 to 4 days, and then we would add green beans or whatever the next food we use, and that was to rule out allergies. We knew he already had a dairy intolerance from past experiences and having to cut away all dairy from my diet while pumping. Oh, the sacrifices we did make for our children. And boy, 18 months without cheese was long. So during the transition to a blended diet, my dietitian formulated 5 recipes for us to begin with. And she gave us the breakdown and answered all my questions that I needed. She gave us all the recommendations for the extra vitamins, minerals, and supplements. We applied to a medical assistance program for a high-speed blender, and BlendTech and Vitamix both have these. Once I received the blender, it was like Christmas. I was extremely excited. Eli has done very well on a full, completely blended diet and has been for the last 6 months. Some of the pros, just to name a few, are he's had a huge decrease in reflux and an increase in sleeping at night. And as for me, as being the mom, that's a plus. We also have no more pump feeds. And most importantly, we are in the 50th percentile in his weight. So most people think it's more time consuming, and I look at it in a different way. This is something I can do, not no one else, that can improve or benefit his quality of life. And some have asked me, how do you do this? What do you feed him? The better question is, what don't I feed him? Me personally, I food prep once a week, usually in just one afternoon. I wash, cut, cook, and blend fresh vegetables and fruits, but I also use frozen as well. As far as meat, he gets chicken, eggs, Angus beef, salmon, turkey, beans, you name it, we've probably tried it. His latest blend includes a 19-pound turkey I baked, Then I let it cool. I packaged it up, froze it. Talk about meat for days. I don't like to waste anything, so during my research, I found that a carcass, what to do with carcass, and so now I make bone broth. It has huge GI benefits. It's rich in minerals and supportive of the immune system. Heals gut lining and reduces intestinal inflammation, and it improves joint health. And I can do this all while it's in the crock pot. When traveling or days when I'm tired or I haven't blended, which does happen, I use a prepackaged food backup called Real Food Blends. Some days that orange package is extremely a lifesaver. It is made with real wholesome food with no corn syrup or preservatives. We get ours with our monthly supplies through our DME Apple. I know this may not be for everyone. My suggestion to you is to find a GI clinic with a supportive doctor and dietitian for whatever choice you make for you and your child. One that will guide you with your child's nutritional needs. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my amazing dietitian, Kathleen Eustace. Thank you.
So I actually sound a lot better when she says it than I feel. So Eli kind of came to me in a weird way. She had other dietitians beside me, and I was one of the only dietitians that children was doing Blenderized at the time, and I got there 3 years. Something I kind of did a lot, and now we do it all the time. And so she got pushed over me, and we've been working together for quite some time. Eli, of course, is doing well. I know not all of you. I mean, I can talk pretty loud, actually. Oh, that's okay. Not all of you guys are going to do Blenderized, and that's perfectly fine. So I included everything in here. I see a variety of CP patients. I mean, we're talking all the way from mild to severe. I've seen them all. We've worked together. Eli's a special boy in a special case, and he's done really well under what Brittany wanted to do, and I was basically just the supportive system. So we're going to talk about everything, and at the end I did include some slides about this, so if you guys are interested, and then of course you can ask me any questions you want at the end. So let's just get started. So I kind of wanted to go through first and talk about understanding growth. Then I want to talk about maybe understanding the needs of your kids. How do we determine what calories they need? What does it look like? How much protein they need? And then I want to talk about some nutrition concerns, the most common ones that I see, the most common ones that I talk about, kind of give you guys an idea of basically what you need to do, kind of on your own, or maybe what you want to ask about, especially if you don't have a dietitian that will kind of lead you into the questions that you want to ask. And then malnutrition. So this is kind of common. In fact, it's the most common thing that you read about in CP. It comes in many different ways. Mild, moderate, severe, leads to G-tubes, a bunch of different things. And so we want to talk about malnutrition and things that we can do to prevent it, and then to turn things around as well. And then I thought we'd go ahead and talk a little bit about enteral feeds. I'm sure at least half of our folks here have had experience with G-tubes. Is that correct? Yeah. So then I thought we'd maybe run through enteral feeds and talk about that, and then of course we'll talk about the So this is first about understanding growth. This is kind of a busy slide, but I just wanted to walk through it with you guys because I find that oftentimes when people come into the clinic and I am consulted to come in and talk about their nutrition, they've heard from a bunch of different providers, a bunch of different information about their nutrition. And of course, nutrition is growth, right? Are they nourished enough to grow, especially pediatrics? Are they growing? Are they growing? So I wanted to talk about our measurements. How do we determine that they're growing? Because sometimes kids get sent to me and I'm like, oh, they're fine. And then sometimes they get sent to me and I'm like, no, they don't look fine. So the question is, how do I determine that? And as a parent, when people are telling you they do or do not look fine and multiple different providers are telling you different things, really how do you help judge that so that you can support that? So the first thing is weight. So weight and weight for age is so variable with these kids. Sometimes their weight seems low, but it's perfectly healthy for their body. Sometimes it's really, really high, but it looks good on the growth chart, but we think it's much too high, right? Because the proportion of their weight for their body is too high. So you want to be careful with weight. Weight should be monitored well, but it should be more about the trend of their weight, right? Are they trending appropriately? Do they look good? When you physically assess them, does their weight look good, or do they look really thin with their weight, or do they look really high? Weight for age, this is the growth chart. You guys have all heard growth charts. What does it look like? On the growth chart, it's weight for age is where they are in reference to standard, right? So I put some other growth charts on here because I wanted to show you guys in reference to standard. So we want to be careful with weight for age. We really want to compare weight for themselves, right? Their weight for themselves. Like, do they look thin? Are they growing well? Is their weight getting high? So weighing can be so difficult with cerebral palsy, right? Especially in their wheelchair. They have a lot of braces, back brace, leg brace, you name it. So I always encourage our parents to weigh everything and then call your provider and give them the weights. They'll put it in their chart. It'll be there. You don't have to worry about it. You don't need to write it down and keep it in your phone. That way you can just weigh on the scale and just subtract it all and you have a great weight, right? And it's an easy process and you can move on with it, right? And so the other thing you can do is if your child is small enough at the time, then of course you can weigh yourself with the child and then subtract your weight, which is an easy way to do it rather than having to go through a big process for weight. So this is how we generally do it at our clinic. So I encourage you guys to have that information so that you know. That way you don't see huge gains of weight and then they want you to cut fees or decrease their intake, or you see large changes and they encourage you to do something different when whatever you're doing for your child works really well. Okay, height and height for age. This one's really difficult. The thing about CP is cerebral palsy kids don't always grow standard growth, right? Sometimes they're shorter. A lot of times they don't grow as fast, and this can affect their overall status, their weight for height. If they're growing slow, they're going to grow slow. Some kids, this is just something that happens with them. So we want to make sure that we understand height in reference to the child themselves, right? Because there can be joint contractures, scoliosis. I found kids who have have normal ulnar segments, but they have stunted lower extremity growth, right? So it looks like they should be much, much taller, but they're not, right? So we talk about how, I put in here, we would like to do a folding stadiometer, which is measuring standing up or laying down, but a lot of times they use the tibial growth. A lot of times they use the ulnar growth because it's easy, right? If they're a contractor or in a wheelchair, they'll use that. But we want to be careful with that. We want to look at them and see if that works, because if their arms are really long but their lower extremities are really stunted and they're short, then you may find that that doesn't really work for your child. It's going to skew your growth chart, right? Physical assessment is important in conjunction with this information when we're dealing with nutrition. Because again, it would change what we recommend if we're like, oh, they're not growing, oh my gosh, right? But really they're going to be short, so we probably don't want them to gain as much weight as fast. All right, so then we talk about tricep skin fold. Tricep skin fold is where you measure between the arm and pinch it up and measure. It's a measure of fat, okay? Less than the 5th percentile shows malnutrition, and generally everyone, right? So this is something that we can do for all children to make sure they're growing, and then we like to look at their trends. Like, so when you see the weight or you see the length and it's kind of off or it's kind of askew and there's some question, I'll get tricep skin fold, right? Because it'll measure their weight and then I can track it, because I'm going to tell you guys trends. How are they trending? How are they growing? And I can track it better on the kid if they have contractures or they look thin, but they have good fat mass on their arms. Then okay, like they look okay. They might be a little smaller on the growth chart, but it looks okay and they're trending. So then I wouldn't necessarily be as worried. And then mid-arm circumference. This is just measuring around, and we can plot this and get mid-arm muscle mass. But one of the things about this is it'll measure muscle. I mean, it'll measure just around, but it'll go, people do a lot more fat than muscle, right? Fat than muscle. I should have said this earlier, but muscle versus fat. So a lot of our kids with hypotonia, right, they don't have as much muscle, right? They have a lot less lean muscle mass. So these kids, they're going to weigh less than our kids who are very spastic and or they're dystonia, or they're jerking and they have more muscle mass, right? So a lot of times your mid-arm circumference will be normal, but they'll have a lot of fat mass, and then they'll have very, very low calorie needs. So there's some adjustments there. But really the reason I wanted to go over this is because I want you guys to see that there's so much variety, there's so much variable information, and it should be a comprehensive approach to see if their nutrition is appropriate, right? If everything looks pretty good, right, their mid-arm circumference is pretty good, their tricep skin fold, their weight looks good, their weight for height is okay, but they're short, so everything's a little smaller, then that's still okay. Your child is still healthy. So I wanted to show you these growth charts. Not everybody uses these growth charts. These aren't the most amazing growth charts. There's been multiple growth charts that come out. The standard ones we use are the WHO or the CDC. They're for standard age children. This is how they should grow. 50th percentile means 50% of children weigh more, or 50% of children weigh less than your child at their age for their weight. But I wanted you to show group 1. So the dark line is standard. That's standard kids. The blue, is group. So the dotted line is standard. Group 1 is CP kids who can walk, and they eat by mouth, they don't need a lot of assistance. The blue group is kids who can walk, they do need assistance though, they do talk, they do most of their mobile function. Group 3, right, is they don't walk well, they scoot, they need help with feeding, right? And then I'll show on this one, this is boys and girls. And then this is group 5. The dark line is group 5. These kids, they don't walk, they don't talk, they don't scoot. They are G2 fed exclusively. Look how much further down than the dotted standard line this is. Now these growth charts, they're not perfect. What I wanted you guys to see is that these growth charts show that CP kids, especially when they're full care kids, a lot of times they don't need to be standard growth size, right? Because they're going to have lower linear growth. Often that is the case. You'll often have contractures. They'll often have scoliosis. And so their lengths, they're not going to grow as much. So their heights, their weights don't have to be as much either, right? Because we want them to be proportional. Because children who are too heavy for their bodies put a lot of pressure on their bodies, right? They put pressure on their backs. They can have more breathing problems, right? Most importantly, they have worse outcomes if they're too heavy for their body, right? So one of the things that I want to show you, and these are not end-all be-all, they've slowly over the years put out different CP growth charts, and these are great because they actually break it down into different groups of severity. But it's showing, what I wanted to show you guys is, putting your child on a standard growth chart and expecting them to meet standard growth all the time may not be best for your child, right? It might be at the detriment of your child to force him to gain all this weight because he's never going to get that tall, right? So we want to find a happy balance for your child for health. So now, if they're walking and talking and doing well, they often will meet standard growth charts. But with increased severity, a lot of times you can expect decreased trend of growth, right? Trend of growth. So that's something when you go in and someone says, oh, they're so small, we need to give them as many calories as possible. No, we need to give them as many calories that is suited for their body, right? And so we want to use every measure of growth that's appropriate for the child to do a full and appropriate assessment about what they need, right? Because you can go into places and say more calories, more calories, more calories, but not always is that the case as long as they're trending well, okay? All right, so let's talk about understanding calorie needs. A lot of people question this. Well, how much really does my child need? For the most part, it depends on your child and their medical history. We usually start with a recommended daily allowance, which is just numbers that have been devised for children based on research. This is roughly what they need for calories per kilogram of their body weight. But there are a ton of things that can affect calories, and I take this into account anytime I look at a child, anytime they come in with different issues, or they're on a G-tube, or we're starting one, or they're losing weight, we always look at this. So what are their factors that affect their calories based on the calories that they're getting in now? We always start with, well, what calories are they getting in now, which actually can be hard to do in their oral feeding, but we can at least get a good idea with a diet recall. So, medical history, so things that can increase the calorie needs. Well, we know seizures, increased work of breathing, spasticity, dystonia, movement disorders. Anytime that there's a lot of movement or shaking, we pretty much always assume that these kids are going to be high calorie needs, right? What are going to be low calorie needs? Of course, hypotonia. Hypotonia with a lot of times we see quadriplegia, hypotonic. These kids, they need very, very few calories, right? And we don't want to put them at standard calories for age because then they're going to get too heavy, right? And then it's going to be hard on the caregiver and, more importantly, hard on the kid. Limited mobility, and then, of course, chronic malnutrition. I don't know if you guys realize this, but Chronic malnutrition or chronic mild malnutrition is pretty common in CP, and their bodies will readjust to that caloric load, right? Where they're trucking along, great, but okay on that calorie need. So a lot of times we'll say, well, they're trending, but let's put a few more just to see what happens, but let's only do it for a small period of time to make sure that their body hasn't readjusted to what we call malnutrition calories, right? Because their body will slow down to be able to work on the number of calories that it's actually taking in, which is not ideal. That is not ideal for these kids. Okay, so this is protein. So protein is always standard for age. Unless there is something else going on with your kid that makes their protein needs higher, or if they have kidney issues, which can make it a little bit lower, but not that much lower, it is always standard for age. They always need all the protein. It's important for healing and repair. It's important for muscle use. It's important for growth. They always need that much protein. And so one of the biggest things that I see is low protein in kids who have poor oral intake, kids who have great oral intake, but they don't like meat because they don't chew it well. We've seen that. Don't chew meat well, right? I see it in that. And then kids who have very low needs, and I put E in, but that just means G2, general needs enteral nutrition, or they need very low calories, and they're getting an enteral feed. And so that's another time when I see that. So we'll have to add protein in, because not only are we trying to get them to grow, have good, help their muscle tone the best way we can, but also low protein increases your risk for, again, slow healing and pressure ulcers. Right? So if your child is in a wheelchair or they do sit for long periods of time, increased skin breakdown with low protein. Right? So you want to be careful with that. So these are your needs, right? So this is broken down. This is how we determine it. This is how I determine it. You guys can take a picture of this and have it. It's actually not too difficult to get to this, especially an oral feeder, because beans, peanut butter, eggs, lentils, everything qualifies. Quinoa, everything qualifies. With Eli, we would do non-meat source blends where we just relied on beans and quinoa, and it'll meet needs. We just got to find the right thing, which is why blends are so good, because there's all sorts of stuff that you can add in. All right, fluid. So fluid is a big thing. This is based on weight. Research shows that children who meet 90% of their fluid needs in CP tend to have better outcomes stooling, they have less constipation, and they do a little bit better. So 90% of needs, so this will all meet, everything I put up here meets 100% of need, right? But 90% is the minimum that they ask that we ever go. And so I'm a big proponent of making sure fluid is okay. The only time that fluid is okay to do a little bit less is if you have trach. If you're vent dependent, then we do want you guys to go a little bit less, because we don't want to increase secretions. We want them to be able to breathe a little bit easier, and only then it's only 80%. Right? Only percent of 100% needs. You never go below 80%, right? There's always the exception to the rule. Let me just put that out there. Your child is probably not, but I have had exceptions to that rule. When the child is just fine on it, good skin turgor, good urine output. So those are things you want to look for, right? If you can't measure it yourself, or you're doing a blend, or you sometimes just can't get your child to drink during the day, what are you looking for, right? You're looking for good urine output. What does it smell like? How often do they pee? What color is it? It might be embarrassing to ask, or go in there and check behind them, but it's a lot easier if they're in the diaper, because you can look at it. But that's important to know. What does their skin look like? Do they cry well, right? Are their lips dry? And sometimes if you're breathing through the mouth quite often, it could just be the way you're breathing, right? And you might just need to use like a chopstick or Vaseline to prevent it. But if there's any other signs with that, then we definitely want to stress fluid. And to me, fluid is not just water; it's everything. As long as you're not putting Coke or coffee out of it, stuff like that. But it means juice, water, Crystal Light. That's all fine. That's all fluid. So it's everything. So we see it with poor oral intake, and then dysphagia with inconsistency. I don't know if you guys have ever drank honey thickened juice or milk. It's weird, right? So it can be difficult to get kids who have dysphagia to drink some of these things. And so we have to encourage, and we have to make it the best way we can. That's why a lot of times kids do like popsicles. We'll do popsicles. It's a little thickened, it'll come with gel, it'll still freeze that way, but as it thins out, it'll gel, and that's still fluid. So Fluid needs, very important. And we'll talk about fluid needs and enteral and stuff as well a little bit later, but for our oral feeders, you know, we definitely want to be looking for those signs. All right, so micronutrients. So micronutrients is vitamins and minerals. That's what it is, vitamins and minerals. Generally speaking, for age. For age. So you look it up and you're trying to figure it out, it is for age. Now, one of the things, which we're going to talk about bone health, vitamin D, and calcium, is not always that way. But iron generally is, your electrolytes are, all your B vitamins are going to be that way, B12, folic acid. So a lot of times people are like, how do I know that there's not a deficiency? If they're eating good variety, then it's highly unlikely that they have a deficiency. You can always give a vitamin if it makes you feel better. It's kind of hard to have toxicities with most vitamins, right, especially if they're water soluble. The one thing I do want you guys to know is that gummy vitamins don't have iron. So if your kid is not a good eater, or they do not eat eggs, right, or lots of leafy greens, then it's likely that they're going to have low iron. And gummies, they don't give that, right? So we need a chewable one. The small ones are mostly a waste of your money, right? And they're going to be difficult for our kids. And with footstones, we can grind them up and things like that. So, and of course, there's tons of powdered vitamins. There's lots of liquid vitamins. But let me warn you guys about these. Just because it's marketed really well doesn't mean it's a complete vitamin. Okay? I get all sorts of stuff, and it has a fraction of what it needs, but it's marketed as everything your kid needs. No. So if you have questions about it, I would highly suggest you take a picture of it and take it in or bring the box into your physician or your dietitian if you have one. Ask, I want to give them this, is it okay? Something that I wish I could put on here, but I didn't, is called... Oh my goodness. One thing that I wish I put on here, but I didn't, I didn't realize, is complementary and alternative medicine. So what I mean by that is stuff that you, put it on the next slide. Stuff that you add in, like probiotics, or aloe vera juice, or turmeric for inflammation, or chamomile to help with the smooth muscle, or people who put cinnamon in it, right, because they heard it helps their blood sugar. There is a million things out there that has been stated to help your child, and most of them are safe. Most of them are safe, right? And I say, if it's no harm, give it a shot, right? Now, some people, they're less open to that. So I would suggest that if your kid is on the long list of medications, or you are not 100% sure that it's going to be a benign product, ask, right? Because medication interactions are a big deal. They're a big deal. And so you want to be careful. But for the most part, these are options for you guys. Probiotics are a good option, especially if kids who are bloated or they have constipation, and there are a lot of safe options out there. Another one that I see a lot is aloe vera juice, right, to help move them out. Did you guys know that aloe vera juice helps? I'm sure you guys have Googled that. But so I see a lot of this stuff. So it's a good idea as long as there's no contraindications to it, right? So if you ask your doctor and they say, well, I really don't know anything about it, but it's not unsafe, then it's fine to try, right? Because you're not going to, most of these are not going to make huge changes in your child's overall health. However, there might be some minor ones, right? And that's perfectly fine. All right, did I miss anything on here? Okay, so I just gave some specific examples of issues that you may have. We talked about iron, electrolyte issues. A lot of people like to use Pedialyte, but it's highly unlikely your child has electrolyte issues unless they really don't drink or they have something called diabetes insipidus or some other issues. But it's happened, right? I'm sure some moms out there, it's happened before. So that's when you need to be concerned about it. And your physician will talk to you about that, and then they will give you the recommendation. Because unfortunately, some of the stuff, if you just go supplementing, it can be dangerous. You can't just supplement potassium, right? Because high potassium causes heart issues, which sends you to the hospital, right? So you have to be very, very careful about what you do supplement. Okay, so let's talk about common nutrition issues. I am specifically a GI expert, like a pediatric GI dietitian, so this is what I see more than anything. People come to me because they have G-tubes or they have GI issues, right? So this is a lot of what we talk about. One of the biggest things I always talk about is bone health. Bone health is so important because with CP, you're non-weight bearing, there's medications, scoliosis, contractures. There's so much that comes with CP, and bone health is such a big issue. You see a lot of loss of bone mass density in CP. So some of the stuff, you know, it's the physician, they're going to be doing it. But one of the things that you can do is make sure they're getting plenty of calcium and vitamin D. It is very difficult to get a vitamin D toxicity. You can get to, most kids can go up over the age of 5, they can go to 8,000 units a day, which is a lot. And so it's very difficult to make sure vitamin D is not a problem. Well, and we'll talk about calcium. But we talked about this multifactorial issue, and again, like we said, the one thing that you can do, of course, is making sure that they always get calcium. And one of the things that I've noticed too is that patients who are on low G2 feeds, low volume G2 feeds, they tend to be the ones who are missing calcium and vitamin D. Then the kids who do not like milk or have GI issues when they drink milk, that's actually very common. Those kids have issues. Unfortunately, calcium in almond milk and orange juice, that's good, right? But it's not quite as bioavailable as it is in milk, but we want to make sure that we're giving a supplement if they don't like milk, right? For most kids, meeting needs is 100%. I think I actually have a 10. For most kids, you should be able to meet needs. Here's calcium. For most kids, you should be able to meet needs with these numbers. And there are easy ways to supplement these if you don't meet these numbers. Because again, remember I said it's recommended for age. If your kid is this age, it's age recommended. That's what it is. So it's pretty easy to supplement these kids. If you can do the fortified orange juice, again, it's not as bioavailable. We tend to use Tums. We tell you to do Tums with a little bit of acid. It'll break down the calcium carbonate, which is all Tums is, and then it's a little bit more available. Again, you cannot take calcium and iron together. Do you guys know that? Calcium and iron cannot go together because they use the same transport mechanism, so you can't get one and the other. You have to do them separately if you're doing some sort of supplement. Gummies, this is only for oral feeders. There's all the Flintstones, vitamin, calcium, vitamin D gummies. These are pretty great. You can get kids to eat them pretty easily, especially if your kids are not going to do yogurt or cheese or milk or anything that has calcium and vitamin D. Tums, Citracal. Citracal is a different type of calcium. It's called calcium citrate. It's more absorbable than calcium carbonate. And if your kid has history of fractures when you are being told to supplement, I would recommend this one because the type of calcium that it is. Granted, it only comes in pill form, so if they can't swallow it, you have to crush it, which is unfortunate. And we don't have any powder or liquid calcium citrates. I don't know why it's not on the market, it's just not. Just not. You can really only get liquid calcium carbonate, unfortunately. But again, that's available. There are some other powders available, and I always see them, they're new on the market. I just had a kiddo bring me one yesterday. It was a powder form, but again, it was calcium carbonate. Generally, the supplements are around 500 milligrams, and that's a pretty good supplement. All right, so we talked about vitamin D already. Granted, 8,000 units per day is pretty much the maximum you should go. Now, we have kids that we go very, very high on, but again, that's a clinician ordered thing. But for vitamin D, most vitamins have 400 units, which is generally what a kid would need extra from what they were taking in, just generally speaking. So a multivitamin goes a long way. It goes a long way. Again, it's the same thing with calcium. These are what the kids, the problem these kids have. Okay, so the next one is constipation. I see constipation all the time. It's because of limited mobility. So we see dysmotility. One of the things is too much fiber or too little fiber. Age plus 5. That's how you figure out if your kid's getting enough fiber, and then look it up in your foods. If they're oral feeders, then it's going to be a little bit more difficult. If they have G-tubes, then it's going to be a little bit easier because you can just calculate it off the can, right, on the number of cans they get. But age plus 5. So I see a lot of this. If you don't have enough fluid, but you have enough fiber, your kid is still going to be constipated. They're still going to be constipated. I tell all my little kids, it's a water slide. If there's no water, there's no slide, right? So then they know you have to drink water. They're always like, ew. Like, have you ever gone on a slide that has no water on it? Yeah. Okay, so possible therapies. This is where we talk about that. And then prune juice, aloe vera juice, castor oil. And we've used them all, right, to help flush things through. I know. To help flush things through. So a lot of people want to use something more natural. They don't want Miralax every day. Although sometimes Miralax, it's a must, right? Especially if limited mobility, sometimes you have to do that. Now I'm fine if you guys want to use alternate options or balance, right? Some of your Dulcolax, Miralax with a more natural option, but it's got to make sure that they're passing their stool as well. And then I did put on here change in formula blenderized feeds. If you're having a lot of constipation issues, sometimes we can just change the formula and that'll help, but also blenderized feeds have been shown to really help with this. Okay, diarrhea. Lots of diarrhea out there. Sometimes it's unknown. Sometimes it's just the amount of sugar you're putting in your child or just the intolerance of the formulas. Pectin, do you guys know what pectin is? That's what you use to make jams and jellies. You can find it on the jams and jellies aisle. We put it in a lot of feeds. I even have kids eat it orally to help slow things down. It's just because their motility is really fast. It's associated with their diagnosis. It's an unknown etiology. We've tried everything. So your options are loperamide, right, which is Imodium. And then, but a lot of times we use pectin and it works. Or sometimes fiber helps, right? Because they're having diarrhea because their diet has no fiber. So they're getting plenty of juices and stuff and things are just rushing through them, right? So we suggest to add fiber foods, gummies, things like that. Probiotic we talked about, when we talked about this decreased sugar. High sugar loads pulls water into the gut, right? So if you're having lots of diarrhea, eating your kid juice or a high sugary product, and then consider cutting all that out and seeing if that helps. And then, of course, changing formula, blenderized formula. So poor oral intake, this is something I see a lot. I do a lot of educations on increasing calories. One of the things you can do is adjust the texture. Work with your speech therapist. Make sure they can actually, if they're not feeding well and losing weight, make sure their mechanics are good. Right? Make sure they're mechanical. Dysphagia is so common, right? Oral motor fatigue issues are so common in CP. So it's a really great idea to make sure the mechanics work. And if they need some texture changes, give them some texture changes. Thickening, small frequent meals. Maybe they get tired in between, so small frequent meals is a little bit better of an idea. Maybe not letting them drink a ton while they're eating. Kids have done that, and then they eat less, and then they have those kind of issues. And then adding calories. I'm a big proponent of adding calories into foods they already consume because sometimes you just can't make kids eat more. Like, that's just not how it works. So we talk about adding calories into the foods that they're currently consuming, right? So there's so many things that you can do. Heavy cream and eggs, scrambled and cooked in butter, add cheese on top, right? Smash up your pancakes with butter or honey or a little olive oil. Coconut oil or coconut cream and applesauce, maybe whipping cream or dry milk powder and pudding. I mean, you can't really taste all this. I know it sounds a little bit weird, and it's mostly fat and proteins, right? It's mostly fat and proteins. We would never encourage you guys to add sugar to your diets, clearly, but fat and proteins a lot of times with our oral feeders who aren't doing well, this will get them a little bit more calories without having to force them to eat more. There's also supplements. I'm sure at one point I've heard of these. Pediasure, Boost very high calorie. There's something out on the market now called Boost Compact, which is 4 ounces, but it's 360 calories, which is a lot for a tiny little drink. You can use those. And then there's modulars like Duocal and Liquigen. These are a little bit more difficult to get. You have to get them through a direct medical equipment company, and usually you have to have an order for them. Liquigen is a type of fat that blends into feeds. Duocal is just a powder that's soluble. Both of them just mix right in, and they don't taste like anything. They're an easy thing to use in kids who are poor feeders. They do not contain any micronutrients, right? So it's strictly just calories. But if your kid is needing all their micronutrients, but they just need some more calories, then these are a good go-to. And you need to talk to your physician about them because they're difficult to get. And you might as well have them covered by insurance if you can get them covered. But they're a good option. And then, of course, partial and G-tube feeds. Eventually, a lot of kids, they have to go to G-tube feeds. This is very, very common. And has been shown to really prevent or help with malnutrition, to get them over that hump where they're healthy again. So enteral feeds, supplemental, you can do overnight, you let them eat, and then you bolus something, you let them drink some Pediasure, here you get 4 ounces, you don't drink it all, you bolus it, there's all those options, and then you get full feeds. And I do the gamut. Whatever works for the parent works for me, as long as the child is healthy and tolerates it well. So bolus feeds, which means you're just gravity feeding it in, or just using a fast pump. You can use them during the day and some overnight, really whatever works for you and the child. And then you can really change your mind, right? You can go for one or the other. If they're not doing well, or they're sick, or they've gone in the hospital, and continuous feeds seems like the best option to go for a long time. That doesn't mean you're stuck there. You're not. As soon as the child is better, see if you can speed the write it out, talk to your provider, see if you can speed it up, so that you can start moving them back to bolus. There's nothing wrong with that. You're never stuck with a specific thing. As long as the child is doing well on it at that time, you can move through options. I'm sure it's a lot easier with dietitian. I call families all the time, like, okay, let's try this, okay, let's do this. But as long as you have someone supporting you, a physician of some sort, then this is something that's fine. Oh, I'm sorry. So there's tons of different formulas. I just put a list, but I can tell I'm running out of time, so I'm going to speed it up. Tons of different formulas, broken down ones, amino acid ones. I send samples all the time. Try this, this isn't working, try this, right? And you just try it and get instructions and make changes, because your child is never stuck on what they're on. There should be always another option if they're not tolerating it, right? There should always be a secondary option. And then one of these ones I wanted to tell folks about is low calorie, high nutrient. There are actually two types of formulas out there that are extremely high in nutrients but extremely low in calories. It's called Pediasure Sidekicks and Complete Pediatric Reduced Calorie. These are really good for kids who have low calorie needs, but you don't want to supplement them a ton. Calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, and all this stuff. So these are options for you guys. So talking about home blenderized formulas, this is something that I'm doing a lot. When I first got there, it was just a burgeoning interest. Now it's everywhere. And I think it's a great thing. I think it's actually a wonderful thing, especially if you're willing to do it. There is a level of normalization that comes with it. A lot of families, they put together, whether they blend or they make their food, right? Or they let children eat, and then whatever's left, they blend it up and put it in their tube, right? And it's more comprehensive. They're more involved. They feel like the child's more involved with the family. A lot of research, not a lot of research, but a good amount of research is being done, a lot of anecdotal information about it, making things better. There's been research showing that it significantly helps with reflux, better stool output, doesn't matter, constipation or diarrhea, it's helped it. GI intolerance, illnesses, it's been kind of shown to be more well-rounded. The other thing is it increases your proclivity to oral feeds. Nobody knows why. Is it because they're burping up all the different flavors and then they're more used to it when they put it around? I don't know. But they have seen that kids are more willing to eat by mouth when you switch them from just Pediasure to a blenderized feed, and it may be the flavors. I don't know, but we have seen some of that in research. And also, you can control the restrictions. Corn-free, dairy-free, vegan, you can control it, right? As long as you have someone who can help you get a good blend and who can run it through maybe a food processor so you know you're getting all the micronutrients you need, you can really restrict what you need to for these children. You really can, because I have done a lot of that for different families, and it does help, but we can meet their needs. We really can. And then I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but Medicaid is changing. And they're not, especially they're not being as supportive as they once were, and private insurance is definitely not as supportive as it once was. So a lot of our families aren't getting their formula covered, which blows my mind. But it's much cheaper to do this. Actually, EleCare, to feed a kid on EleCare Junior G-Tube every day is about $17 a day versus $6. So if you're not being supported through insurance, and you want, dietitians, we can support you to do things a little bit cheaper if you're willing to do it. So that's another benefit to this if you're not getting support. So there are some things that we say you're either in or you're out, unfortunately, with some of these things. Much more inclusion, medically stable, appropriate weight or length. I fudge on this, right? As she said, Eli had some troubles with being overweight, and we still did it, right? We still did it. So as long as you have a dietitian who's supportive and can get you there, then some of this stuff is fudgy, let's put it that way. Motivated care providers. As you said, you have to be motivated for this. You do. It's a lot of work. You have to be motivated. You got to have blenders, you have to have sanitation, you got to have storage, you have to have all the food. You have to be motivated to want to do this. Well-heeled G-tube sites, if it's brand new, we kind of tell you guys to wait and make sure it's healed, because there are some risks with clogging and things like that, so you got to be careful. And then tolerance to bolus feeds. Again, there's some exceptions to this. I have transitioned kids from continuous feed to bolus blenderized feeds before in my clinic, so as long as you have someone and you're doing it safely and you're moving slowly, this can be done. Exclusion criteria. If they just can't handle volume, this is hard. If they just cannot handle volume, or they are very, very sensitive, this is very difficult. GJ tubes, we really don't do GJ tubes. We try to get kids to move to G. Sometimes kids tolerate G tube feeds with Blenderized better than they tolerate G tube feeds with formula. I have seen that. So it's definitely an option. And then if you just can't get the supplies, right, then this isn't possible. So this just talks about sanitation. I don't have much time, so I'm just going to go through this quickly. Assess with fine RD. That's what I do. I tell you, this is how many micronutrients you need, this is what you need, this is the calories, this is protein, this is fat, these are the percentages, this is what it looks like, this is what you're going to have to supplement or you're going to have problems. You know, someone can walk through it. And then when you're building your own recipes, which I'm fine with as long as you have like a skeleton recipe, we want you to send them in so we can look at them. Okay, this recipe is good, but your folic acid is too low, right? Go ahead and do this. So that's why you need an RD, because they need to look at it and be like, this is what you're going to be missing, right? Or this is too dry, or this is 80% fat, right? Because you wanted to use flaxseed oil and peanut butter and olive oil. If you can't do all that, we need to make some switches here and there. So the other thing is we talked about this, I sent it out, sanitation. This is how you should freeze it. This is how you should unfreeze it. This is how you can make it last for 6 months. This is what blends. This is what doesn't blend. This is what puffs, right? This is what sticks in your tube. And we all know that nobody medically only gets a tube every 6 months, right? So if you messed it, they're out, right? So we want to talk about preparation techniques and how to make it work for you and the child, right? Sometimes I've had families who they couldn't get blueberry skins through there, right? I've had some people say that they did, but I'm always saying don't start with blueberries because blueberry juice, right? So don't start with blueberries, so let's be careful. So, and then the continued analysis. So if you cannot blend, here are some options for you guys. I just wanted to let you know. Nourish just came out. It was, people wanted Nourish. Everyone asked about it. It only came out in February. Oh, March, the end of March. So it is complete. It is vegan, non-GMO, 7 food allergen-free, soy-free, corn-free. It's complete when you use 3 packets. It goes through your pump and it is covered by your insurance, and formula covers it. Now let me tell you, not all companies cover it. So some of your direct medical companies will, and some will won't, periods. You have to switch, but some parents are willing to, so it's really up to you. Or if you can just get your supplies from that should be fine. So Complete Pediatric, this is from Nestle. This comes in a can. This is really easy to get. It's not the same. It's a little bit different. I would say it's right between formula and real food blends, like real foods, like blended up. It does contain milk. It's lactose-free, gluten-free. It's 30 calories an ounce, where our Nourish is 34 calories an ounce. So if you need a little bit more calories, more bang for your buck. Liquid Hope, this is the adult version of Nourish. I don't let my kids use it until they're 15 years old, because the vitamin A and the fiber is so excessive that your child's not going to be able to handle it. I have so many people ask me, I'm like, I'm sorry. It's not safe enough for your child. So when you see these products come out, because I have a good feeling that the market's about to be swamped with some of these products because they're getting more and more popular. I've seen 3 pop up in just the past 2 years. Be careful. This is not an appropriate formula for little kids. And I get questions all the time about it. Just so you know, I just put it up here, Complete Pediatric Reduced Calorie is a low-calorie blended formula that's pretty great for kids as well. But it's for low-calorie, high-nutrient needs.